Deb?
Already.
All right, thank you and welcome to the Port Commission work session. This is Monday, November 18th, 2024, and it's 3:31 p.m. I will officially call this meeting to order. I believe we have all commissioners here except Commissioner Vasavada may be joining us remotely. Is she on, Missy?
She's trying to get on. She's looking for the link right now.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, we do have an agenda in front of us. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving today's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries, so we have an agenda. Should we give Commissioner Vasavada a minute to join us, or Alex, are you ready to jump in?
Why don't we jump in and hopefully Commissioner Vasavada can connect pretty quickly, because I'll take a minute for introductions. So we wanted to give you all a chance to meet our state and federal lobbyists and talk about our 2025 legislative agenda. So on the left is Kelsey Hulse, who you guys may know from Propolis Communications. She is our state lobbyist. And to her right is Crystal Ellerby, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. And Crystal is used to also, I guess, be with Strategies 360 and has now opened up her own lobbying firm and is, according to Kelsey, no, she is a a funding savant. That's how she knows where the money is and can help people get money.
We like that.
Awesome. And so I will turn it over to these guys to talk about federal and state lobbying and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you, everyone, for allowing us to come and talk to you today about the federal and state agenda for 2025. As you know, the election results is what it is, and we have to move forward from that. And there's a lot of unknowns right now, and so we're gonna just keep this on a high level, but we can get into the nitty gritty of it probably when the unknowns become known. Probably potentially maybe by the end of the year and going into the new year, because January 3rd is when the 119th Congress, the members will be sworn in at noon. And that when that takes place, the speaker's race will take place, and that will not be as eventful as it was the last time with former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So we do have a deck. I'm going to start off with the federal portion of it. And again, just going to keep it high level. We're going to talk about some of the things that President-elect Trump mentioned on the campaign trail that I believe is going to be significant for the Port of Olympia. And I hope I'm getting this right. So one of the things for his second term, he talked about a lot is tariffs. He is going to go through with that. And what is unknown, how they're going to do it, because they're trying to use tariffs as pay-fors for a lot of the things they want. They want to make permanent some of the tax cuts from 2017. So with the tariffs, he has been proposing on the campaign trail, and even now, a 10 and 20% across the board tariff on all 3 trillion worth of goods and services. And that's what he is very adamant about doing that. But the devil is in the details, and Congress is going to have to weigh in on this. And the committees of jurisdiction on the House side will be House Ways and Means Committee, because they are responsible for tax provisions. All tax provisions prevail in the House first. On the Senate side, you have the Senate Finance Committee. And with regards to that, there are going to be shakeups on the committees because you have freshmen coming in the House and Senate. But with regards to tariffs, that will be the major committee of jurisdiction on the House side. One thing that I would like to tell you, on the House side, when they introduce bills, it doesn't just go to one committee, it goes to multiple committees. And I'm assuming that there will be other portions within that bill that will go to a lot of different committees. So it'll be sequentially referred to a lot of different committees. On the Senate side, it'll go to finance because they have the trade jurisdiction. One of the other things that I just learned when I was putting together the presentation, the US-Mexico agreement, Canada agreement, that is up for renewal. And that could change significantly, particularly when it comes to Mexico, because as you all know, the president-elect wants to secure the southern border. And so there may be some issues with regards to that and how that free trade agreement is renewed, and if there's going to be changes to it. And in all likelihood, there probably will be some significant changes to that. One other thing, when it comes to normal trade with China, he has spoken on the campaign trail that he wants to revoke permanent trade, normal trade with China. That is something that's going to come up again. And right now, I can tell you from what I've been hearing from folks on the House side and listening to Speaker Mike Johnson when he was on the Talking Head shows on Sunday, he did say that they have a 100-day agenda. And they have been working on this probably since early this summer. So they do, the House Republicans have a 100-day agenda. To me, it's like, in all likelihood, reminiscent of when Newt Gingrich became speaker and when they got the majority back in 1994, when they had their contract with America. But I think this is going to go far beyond that. But again, they do have a 100-day agenda. The devil is in the details. I think a lot of it will come out after January 3rd, once they're sworn in. But also remember this. So the 119th Congress, 218 Republican seats to 208 Democratic seats. Magic number in the House is 218. One little thing that you should remember, there's still some difficulties within the Republican conference. Internally, there are moderates who are not going to go along with a lot of the things that this new administration wants to do. And then you have the hardliners from the House Freedom Caucus. There are going to be some rule changes for the House. One thing, I know y'all know about this one rule, the motion to vacate. Right now, it still takes one member of Congress. And they're talking about maybe changing that to probably maybe 16 members, bringing that forth. But as of right now, it only takes one.
Actually over there, if you aim it back over your shoulder, it might work.
See, can you?
Let's see.
Sorry.
Oh, I got it. Okay, talked a little bit about taxes. And this is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. They want to make that permanent. And he did talk about on the campaign trail, getting rid of taxes on tips. Again, devil is in the details. Congress is going to have to figure out how they're going to pay for this. I did read that Senate Finance Committee ranking Republican Mike Crapo from Idaho. He believes that they don't have to use pay-fors when it comes to tax cuts. That's going to be interesting because one of the other things we have to deal with is increasing the debt ceiling. And they have to do that in January. And I think they have to do that, I believe, like January 26th, because the Secretary of Treasury, there'll be enough money to pay the bills. However, it'll get to the point where it'll be bumped up and they have to do extraordinary measures, which could mean draconian cuts to a lot of different programs. So that's one of the main things that they're going to have to do is raising the debt ceiling. And that's going to be a problem because the fiscal conservatives in the Freedom Caucus don't want to do that. And so that's one of the primary things that they're going to have to deal with once they come back January 3rd. Another thing, climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden had touted, probably ever since it was, signed into law. Republicans have talked about clawing back the climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. Any unobligated, unspent funds will likely be clawed back. Any executive orders from President Biden related to energy and environment, President-elect Trump will likely reverse it. So that's one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention with regards to that.
Let's see.
Okay, reconciliation. I'm not gonna get too technical about this, but this is one of the things that House and Senate Republicans are going to use to make those 2017 tax cuts permanent, along with other major tax reforms that they want to do. So in the House and Senate, budget reconciliation is done by a simple majority. So in the Senate, the magic number is 60. Under budget reconciliation, it's 51, that's it. In the House, it's just simple majority, which is 218, and they have that number. However, like I stated earlier, there may be some internal rumblings within the Republican conference. Budget reconciliation is very, very strict procedurally. And if you may recall, when they were debating the Inflation Reduction Act, the Senate parliamentarian had to rule on a lot of the different provisions that the Senate Democrats wanted to do. And there are a lot of things she ruled out of order. And that could potentially happen again. But this is a procedural move that has been used by both parties. So House and Senate Republicans are going to use the same thing in order to push this through. Because right now, well, for the 119th Congress is 218 Republicans. In the Senate, it is, I believe, 53. It's not a veto, it's not a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. You need 60. So circumventing the system, 51 simple majority, this is how they're going to push forth a lot of the initiatives that they had been talking about since after the election, and even during the campaign, on the campaign trail that they've been talking about. And not just President-elect Trump, Republicans that were running for House and Senate seats have been talking about this. Okay, budget and government spending. So December 20th is the day that the continuing resolution expires, because that's what the federal government is operating under. What I've heard, Speaker Mike Johnson said on Fox News on Sunday, that they are now thinking, well, they're going to do another temporary continuing resolution at previous fiscal year funding levels, and they're going to punt it into 2020, calendar year 2025. And hopefully they will try and get fiscal year 2025 completed probably by the spring. Now that's going to hamper the appropriations process for fiscal year 2026, which is pertinent to the Port of Olympia. So for fiscal year 2026, a president is supposed to submit his budget the second Tuesday of February under the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. Normally, that does happen. When Biden was elected, he waited until May. And last year, they didn't finish FY24 appropriations until March. So one of the things that Senator Murray, Senator Cantwell, and Representative Strickland, they go by when the president submits his budget requests. And then that starts the clock on the appropriations process. And each office has their own portals when you submit on the House side congressionally, community project funding requests. Now remember, Representative Marilyn Strickland can only submit 15 projects. Senator Murray she's going to be ranking on Senate appropriations this year. She's not going to be chair of next Congress. She's allowed to submit more than 15. And it kind of ranges around, I mean, at most, probably between maybe 30, or 40 projects. Same thing with Senator Cantwell. Senators have more leeway with regards to their congressionally directed spending requests. But one thing that I will be looking for is President-elect Trump's FY26 budget request when he transmits it to Congress. a president's budget request is dead on arrival. It is. It's dead on arrival. You know, it's just what he thinks his priorities are. But that's going to be key for me for the Department of Transportation, for MIRAD, where they have the port infrastructure grant funding, the Department of Defense, Army Corps, and we already know who he has nominated for Secretary of Defense, waiting to see who's going to be the new head of the Army Corps of Engineering. And also the Department of Commerce, because they have a lot of economic development funding through the Economic Development Administration. So one of the things I am going to be doing is combing through the FY26 President's budget request for you, and then providing you with a detailed memo on those programs within those federal agencies that are important to the port. But again, President-elect Trump, he has statutorily, he's supposed to submit his budget request the second Tuesday in February. But I don't see that happening, but that may change, because I think everything that I'm saying is fluid, because there's still a lot of unknowns, but I wanted just to give you a general thinking of this. And then also, one of the other things is, if you recall, last year, President Biden and former Speaker Kevin McCarthy had made an agreement with regards to top line numbers for defense and non-defense discretionary spending. That is now going to be coming up. That'll expire in January. So those budget caps will be gone, because they made the decision to have caps for non-defense, discretionary, and defense spending. And so that's going to change as well. So you're likely going to see some increases in the Department of Homeland Security for the border, for the southern border. The Department of Defense will be beefed up. And I think there'll also be some changes within the Department of Transportation when it comes to infrastructure. And then also, I'm assuming that all of y'all heard about Elon Musk and the new Department of Government Efficiency. It's a commission. And they are looking at all aspects of the federal government and trying to take out waste, fraud, and abuse. And so from what I've been hearing in the media, Elon Musk is basically like, we're just going to go in with a hatchet, and then we're going to fix things after. Yeah.
Missy, can you? Other way.
Yeah. Infrastructure. So right now, we have 2 more years of funding under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And one of the things that I've been seeing from the Secretary of Transportation and Department of Transportation, they have been trying to quickly move out a lot of that funding. Like recently, the RAISE grant program. So they decided to do 2 years of funding in that notice of funding opportunity. And I'm waiting to see whether or not, well, I do know that the port infrastructure grant funding award will be announced probably in December. Normally, the Department of Transportation's Intergovernmental Affairs staff, we used to meet every month, but since the election, we haven't met. But I'm hoping once President-elect Trump and his new team at the Department of Education will reinstate that, because those are very good monthly meetings, because you can ask questions to the Assistant Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs and his staff about what funding is coming down the pike. If you have an issue, you can directly go to them. So I'm hoping that they will continue that as well. And then also, the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, well, in the Biden-Harris administration, we would meet every Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern time. And I'm hoping that President-elect Trump will continue to do that as well, because we were able to have some good discussions about what was going on and what was needed for the different entities. I will tell you also with regards to infrastructure, so the highway bill has to be reauthorized in 2026. It will not look like the bipartisan infrastructure law. It'll be straight up infrastructure. President-elect Trump wants roads and bridges. I have heard that they do want to try and go after EVs. They want to try and charge them because it's a drain on the gas tax and the diesel tax. So House Transportation Infrastructure Committee has the responsibility to draft a highway bill. And Representative Marilyn Strickland is on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Also, ranking Democrat is still going to be Representative Rick Larsen. And I've worked with him and his staff in the past, and I've worked with Marilyn Strickland and her staff, and they are phenomenal. They know how to get stuff done. So at some point, I would like to talk to you about any kind of projects you think that we can start, fleshing out with regards to the highway bill, but also the Water Resources Development Act. I did find out that I didn't see the Port of Olympia on the chief's report. Every year they call for submissions of projects that will be authorized under WRDA, and then it can be appropriated in the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. So that's one of the things that I do want to work with you closely on to make sure that you will get some projects authorized, and then we can get it appropriated. And that is my high level on the impact of the federal election. And I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey to talk about the state and how we're actually going to interplay with each other with regards to the impact on the federal level. Any questions?
Federal before we move over to the state.
Missy, did Commissioner Vasavita make it on?
He's on.
All right. Do you have any questions, Commissioner Vasavita? I guess not. Kelsey, you can go right ahead.
Okie dokie. Next slide.
Missy? Oh, you got the clicker.
Missy, can you?
Oh, there it is.
Okay, so moving over to the Washington side of things. So as you all are aware at this point, we had a recent election. Those results will be certified November 26th by the counties, and then I believe 2 weeks later, the state will certify those, so nothing is official until that happens. But that's when new statewide office holders and new legislators will become a little bit clearer. In Washington, we had a lot more. We don't have a ton of extremely close races in Washington this round. So the Democrats are likely to pick up 1 seat in the House and 1 seat in the Senate, if I'm prognosticating a little bit, but I'm pretty comfortable with that. That will mean that, well, let me back up a second. So one in the House and 1 in the Senate in the 18th and the 26th districts. In Washington, we've got 2 thresholds for a supermajority, what people refer to as a supermajority. One of those thresholds is a 3/5 or 60% majority, which is required to incur state debt. And so that happens when in both the capital and the transportation budget process, when the legislature bonds against future revenue. That 1 seat pickup in the House and the Senate will get them to that 3/5 majority for incurring state debt, which means they won't necessarily need votes from across the aisle to be able to do that, assuming that the majority party is unified, which, as Crystal discussed, sometimes is the case and sometimes is not the case. But at any rate, that's kind of an important milestone that they reached. The other threshold that Washington has is a 2/3 majority, which is required to amend the state constitution. They did not get to that point. So we're kind of in that interesting middle space there, but for purposes of capital and transportation budgets, that's important. What we call the Committee on Committees, that is the committee that determines who's going to serve on which committees in the legislature. So that process is happening, maybe not literally as we speak, but this week. They will be doing a lot of that work. Each caucus, so that Democrat and Republican caucuses in the House and the Democrat and Republican caucuses in the Senate. Each one has a committee on committees that will meet and assign, who's going to go where. So that process is starting this week. They each have a different date, but in the next couple of weeks, we'll start to get information about exactly what the committee makeup is going to look like. And that, of course, is important because as we strategize around where we're going to spend a lot of our time and invest a lot of effort in building relationships, it's going to be on committees that are of particular interest or relevance to the board. So we have some clarity on that, but that will become very clear for the 2025 session in the next week or two. Assembly days are the 9th through the 13th. So that will bring all the legislators to Washington. Committees will meet. They'll talk through kind of what their priorities are, what they want the early parts of session to look like. But so if you start seeing folks around, that may be possible. We also try to get time with legislators while they're in town to sit down with them and discuss kind of what we're working on and where we'd like to see things go for the legislative session. The governor's draft budget will be out around December 11th. That is for our existing governor. Of course, this year, we not only have a whole lot of new legislators coming into the legislature, but we have essentially a whole new half new executive team at the statewide level. So we have a new governor, Office of Insurance Commissioner, Commissioner of Public Lands. Yeah, about half of the statewide offices will have new occupants. So governor's draft budget, December 11th. As Crystal mentioned, those kind of first budgets are sort of a one version of reality. So the state legislature will then take that governor's budget with a lot of input, certainly from the new incoming governor, and figure out, where they agree, where they disagree, what they'd like to see, how they might change that. So, and then the 105-day session will begin on January 13th. So that may feel like it's far away, but it's not, and it feels like we're sort of hurtling that way because of all these milestones that they'll need to hit for a variety of reasons. Right now, Washington is projecting a budget deficit of somewhere in the $10 to $12 billion range. We will have a new revenue forecast this week, should be out on the 20th. So we will get some more information about that. That is due to a whole variety of factors, including things getting more expensive, projects getting more expensive, project overruns in a variety of areas, labor getting more expensive, kind of everything is going up and all of that is impacting the budget. When you couple that with declining revenues in a variety of different areas, like the gas taxes that Crystal mentioned on the transportation side, those two things don't line up very well and you start getting a bigger and bigger hole to fill. So this is going to be a tough budget year for the state legislature as well. And it's something in my meetings that I've been having with legislators across the state. It is something that they are all well aware of and are all really concerned about. So that is kind of an all-consuming concern, I think, at this point. As they get more assurances, both through subsequent revenue forecasts and a look at the governor's budget, we'll start to see how things are going to shake out a little better. And then there will be more confidence, I think, in what the final budgets are going to look like. And then lastly, I'll just mention that they will start pre-filing legislation beginning December 2nd. So it's essentially a month before the legislative sessions begins. And those bills that are pre-filed will be introduced the first day of session. So last year was a short session. Washington has a biennial budget cycle. So every other year they're doing a full budget. In their budget years, the session will run 105 days, which is what this session will. Last session was a short session and we ended up with about 1,000 pieces of legislation. So the volume of what comes out during the legislative session is pretty extraordinary. And so one of the big jobs of the session is just staying on top of that. Some of the legislation that comes out will be things that we are anticipating, either because we were told that they were pre-filed, or we've had conversations that indicate, or we've, found out that things are coming back from a previous year. But a large portion of that will be things that we don't know are coming. And so we're staying on top of that on a daily basis and making sure that as those bills come out, we can connect with subject matter experts at the port so that they can give me a more realistic picture of how those things may influence the port in one way or the other. So that is an ongoing project. So we've got some key priorities for the legislative session. We've got our priorities, which are really specific to port projects and port work. And a big one of those is going to be building and sustaining strong relationships. We've had changes at the port in terms of staff and new commissioners. We've had lots of changes in terms of legislators who are coming in. We've got statewide executive changes. As a result of those statewide executive changes, we'll see leadership at a lot of state agencies change, as well as staff that will, support all of those folks across that broader governmental landscape. And so we're going to be working really hard on building relationships for the long term with those new folks who are coming into new leadership roles around the state. We are also working to develop and share a strong business case for the port. One thing that has come up in conversations, not just with budget writers, but also with the Corps of Engineers, is, Olympia's port is on the small side relative to its peers. We are quirky in that we don't have any of the big boxes that are on the ships, right? We don't do that. We've got a kind of special business case here. And so being really clear about what that is, why that makes sense for continued investment is going to be really critical moving forward. And Crystal and I have talked a lot about this, but that there is some real opportunity in the future in terms of economic development and infrastructure investment and some things that we're going to see at both the state and federal level. So having that sort of prepackaged to say, not just why the Port of Olympia is special, but why it makes good investment sense is going to be really important. So that's how we'll be framing that conversation and talking about those issues. We'll also be looking to mitigate impacts of new legislation and revenue options. There are, because of that budget shortfall that I identified earlier, the state budget writers, state legislators are going to be looking at all kinds of different revenue options. They have to come up with a way to fill that hole. They also have a lot of things that they want to do that aren't funded yet. And so some things will come back that we've seen in the past, like a road usage charge on the transportation side of things will certainly be part of the conversation, but we'll probably see a whole variety of different ideas around how to raise revenue at the state level. I'll note that we had a couple of initiatives on the ballot that did not pass. Because they did not pass, they did not make the budget situation worse, but the fact of them not passing didn't fix the problem, if that makes sense. I kind of said that backwards, but the concern was, are we in kind of a status quo position, which is already troublesome given the shortfall that we're projecting, or will this hole be made large? It wasn't. So the outcome of the election was positive from a state budget perspective. Still have some problems that we're going to need to solve during the legislative session. And that mitigating impacts of new legislation is just what I talked about. We're going to, every single, morning, we'll be looking at the new bills that are introduced and assessing what their impact on the port will be, and then providing input either to sponsors, to our 22nd district delegation, to folks who, not just 22nd, 2nd, 35th district delegations, but to folks who are, who would have an interest in hearing from the port on what those impacts will be. Our partners also have priorities that they are working on laying out in detail. So folks like the Shared Legislative Partnership, Alex and I have both been part of meetings to talk with that group, which encompasses the county, the cities within Thurston County, and then the port, and
South Puget Sound Community College was there.
SPSCC has participated. I think Lot has participated in the past, though I don't think they've been
In, I think Chehalis Tribe?
Yeah. Chehalis Tribe has participated. So it's sort of open to everybody in the Thurston County region. Some folks choose to participate, some don't. But that is one way that we can elevate priorities that are important to the entire region. And so we'll continue to engage on that, make sure that port interests and concerns are kept kind of front of mind in those conversations. That includes, as I said, all the regional jurisdictions here. And then I'll also mention the estuary restoration project, which is of course ongoing and has some big needs and priorities in the near term. So staying in close communication with those folks to find out kind of what they're working on, how we can be supportive of them, how they can be supportive of us, but so we can stay in close communication and coordination as that project continues to move forward, because obviously it has some significant impacts to the board. Lastly, our industry, led by the Washington Public Ports Association, is something that we stay pretty closely plugged into. They have a kind of lobbying group that I participate in along with all the other port lobbyists. And so we stay in close communication and coordination to make sure that, one, we're providing education that is useful to particularly new legislators, new leaders who are coming into state leadership so that they understand how ports work and what they need and what their concerns are. And we will continue to do that work alongside our industry as part of the WPPA group. The Public Ports Association is still finalizing their legislative agenda, but some things that have been kind of talked about as a portion of that would be supply chain competitiveness funding. So figuring out how to help plug holes in the supply chain and or make more sturdy and stable portions of the supply chain that maybe have been found to be sensitive in the past few years, given a whole variety of things that we've all seen. Clean energy siting and permitting is something that's very important to Washington State and always has been. Public Ports Association has plugged into that conversation as well. That while we have seen significant bills over the last few years to either enable or incentivize clean energy siting and permitting, we'll continue to see that conversation happening. And the Ports Association is very interested in making sure that ports are part of that conversation. And then lastly, the Model Toxics Control Act, MOTCA, because it is a significant source of particularly cleanup dollars for ports, because it is highly influential in the ports world. And in an environment where budgets are tight, sometimes you see things being moved from one bucket to the other. So we'll want to make sure, again, alongside our friends at the Public Ports Association, that MOTCA funding is protected for the future, that we continue to have that as a source for those kind of key items. And I think that's what I want to say to that. So I will also just mention that we've got a lot of big picture projects and priorities that have been a major focus for the port for many years. We will continue working on those. So one of our key items will be continuing to move the Bud Bay cleanup effort forward, right? Many of those efforts are going to be multi-year, long-term, continue to be multi-year, long-term. This is not news to anybody sitting here, but we will continue to be looking for opportunities to move that project forward. So some parts of it will be small, whether through either legislative measures or budget measures, but looking for what we can do amidst this changing landscape to continue moving those significant pieces forward. So in summary, I'll just say that there's a lot of change ahead. Some of which we, as I said, have some clarity around, whether it's the results of the election. And as we see, committees assignments play out and we see draft budgets and things like that, these pictures will become more and more clear. But there is going to be a lot that we will have to sort of take as it comes and figure out the best way forward. So we will be paying close attention, Crystal and I, to budget development at both the federal and state levels. So not just in those big pieces when we see a draft budget from the president or we see a budget from the governor, but also in conversations with budget writers in the background to find out what's happening. What are our kind of major pieces of the conversation that we ought to be aware of. New opportunities for infrastructure and transportation. As I mentioned, because of all this change, we're gonna want to remain really nimble. And so Crystal and I, we stay really plugged in to all of these conversations all of the time because we want to find out about things as soon as possible. We want to be able to respond to things as quickly as possible. And we want to connect with you guys and your staff, fantastic staff here at the port, so that we can get the information we need to help lawmakers understand the impacts of the decisions they're contemplating. Right? Because everything sounds great until you try and figure out how it works, and then things become much, much more complicated. So our job is to make sure that they understand and are aware of the port's perspective in those conversations so that they're never surprised by that at the 11th hour. There are a lot of, there will be opportunities ahead, and that's the other thing that we're gonna be staying really focused on. There will be new revenue at the state level. There's going to be new infrastructure incentives or programs at both the state and federal level. And so as those become clear, we'll be wanting to take advantage everywhere that we can. So make sure that we're positioning ourselves to be ready for those opportunities when they come forward. It's also reasonable to assume that environmental regulations are going to change. And we don't know exactly what that will look like. We know there will likely be changes at the federal level. There will probably be a desire at the state level to try and counterbalance some changes at the federal level. How that will play out, we don't know. So that's another thing that Crystal and I are going to be paying close attention to so that we can have those conversations early, make sure impacts at the port are understood, because that is something that will play out over the coming months. Lastly, I'll just mention that, well, going back to the changing environmental regulations, because of those legacy projects that the port has been working on for any number of years, including Habitat Conservation Plan, right? And the Bud Bay cleanup and some of these big pieces, you know, development and redevelopment on port properties, guardrails around a lot of that could change. So we will be staying on top of that so that we can make sure that your folks who need to know are aware of it as soon as it happens, so that, again, we can go back and share with lawmakers how those potential changes that they're contemplating would affect that kind of economic development activity in particular. And lastly, economic developments and incentives and investments. We anticipate that there will be more of that coming, both out of the federal government and the state government. And so we will use the business case that we are building for the port to get in front of those opportunities as well. Again, trying to make the case as creatively as we can, that investment in the port is a good place for both the state and the federal government to put their limited resources. So we'll make sure that the port is on the radar for new incentives and investments as they become available. All of this is, as I said, going to be a matter of remaining flexible, remaining nimble, staying connected, staying in touch, and responding to opportunities as they present themselves. Add anything?
Covered everything. You did.
It's a lobbyist.
It's on my business card, actually. Any questions that we can answer?
So with our new governor, I guess both of my questions are kind of for both of you. With our new governor outwardly saying he is gonna have some level of hostility towards the federal administration, how do we not get caught in the crosshairs of that when we're looking for funding from both federal funding and state funding, and what can we be doing to be proactive about that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, you know, understanding the changes at the federal level and then how Washington is going to respond to the changes at the federal level. The dance that we'll be trying to do, because quite frankly, it will be a dance, is to stay in front of that and not in between those two things happening.
Would we modify, sorry to cut you off, but I'm gonna piggyback. The port oftentimes does go across the aisle, right, with economic development and environment. So would we potentially modify our approach on our Bud Inlet funding or something like that, so that it was more economic development focused depending on how things roll out, or?
I would say so, because I mean, within the first Trump term, And I was representing a lot of municipalities in the state of Washington. And it was a fine dance. And one of the things that I always did and will continue to do for the port is staying in those staff's faces and just telling them up front, like, hey, we exist. This is what we can provide. And like, we'll be a partner to you, but sometimes there'll be some disagreements, but the majority of the time we'll be a partner with you. Cause I mean, to be honest with you, Amy, one of the things that Trump too is going to have to do, and they did it before, they have to show wins. They're going to need entities like the port. They're going to need municipalities. They're going to need counties to show some wins, because folks are going to be like, okay, we elected you. You made all these promises. Now, you have to, get those promises. Promises made, promises kept. They're going to need wins, because it's going to be hostile in DC. Well, it already is. But I think presenting the business case when it comes to the cleanup of Bud Bay, that's going to be important, particularly because the EPA nominee, former Representative Lee Zeldin, has no experience in environmental issues. He dealt with foreign affairs, and that was it. To be quite honest, I think they're going to roll back a lot of what the Biden-Harris administration did. But like Kelsey said, where we can agree with them is great. But also remember, they need you more than you need them, because they need to show wins. And that was one of the things that I learned rather quickly, particularly working with the Department of Transportation, because they told us up front, like, we need you guys. We're trying to help you. And I'm like, okay, and I will work with you. Same thing up on Capitol Hill. One of the things that I know that I'm going to have to do is on the Senate side, because through the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, they have jurisdiction over the WRDA bill. And we don't have any connections because Patty Murray's not on that committee, and neither is Maria Cantwell. So it's just building those relationships that Kelsey and I want to do. What I like to do is the soft touch. I'll go in, introduce myself, and I will continually keep doing it so they can never say, oh, we never heard from y'all. It's the soft touch that I like to do, and just work behind the scenes and just keep, making the case for y'all, saying, look, we're an emerging port. We're in the state of Washington. There are a lot of things that we could do with the federal government. We're here to help. We want to increase, our capacity when it comes to container ship movement. We want to be goods movement, but we also want to be stewards as well. And there's a way that you can balance that.
I'll just add that part of the reason that we've emphasized the business case as opposed to a white paper on the environmental value of, there are other ways to approach making that same case. But the reason that we are going to be framing things as a business case is because that is more likely to get traction with the groups that we'll need.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys are super familiar. It's both and for us, right? So we can lead with removing contaminated sediment for the benefit of industry, and we can lead with it from the environment, and it's a win-win. So just hopefully that'll be an opportunity for you all to get some wins as well. One other left field, this is for you, Kelsey. There's a couple of county commissioners who've expressed an interest in us as a region doing some hosting of legislators, lobbyists, et cetera, and the Port of Olympia participating with the county. I don't know whether that is ever appropriate but considering it on a small or large scale, how we can familiarize people that are coming here with what we have to offer. So that's something you can talk to Alex about later if you have any ideas, but I think it's a great idea. I sit on the Visitor and Convention Experience Olympia and Beyond board, and that's something we've been talking a lot about. And I think the port would be a very natural fit to build those relationships.
And I'm happy to chat more about that. One of the, I've been trying to crack because one of the things that is wild to me is that folks come in, right? Legislators come in from across the state and they kind of stay in a bubble. and then they leave.
Mhm.
And they don't tend to really kind of engage in the community, and I think to some extent, perhaps don't feel connected or engaged, or, you know, whatever that might be. But I'd love to work more on that. And I think that too will be a long range project, because once they get here for session, you know, it's kind of heads down, 15-minute meetings all day, you know, 5 days a week. So it gets a little challenging, but I agree that it's really important. It's something that we should be focused more on. And I will talk to anybody.
Maybe we host a lunch at the farmer's market, 5 years from now, but at least something that is, you know, getting people more relationship building with our community.
Yeah, I mean, doing some sort of perhaps it's an orientation for new members, right? New members to the legislator, bringing
Yeah.
them in during committee days, or, you know,
Yeah.
and giving them a little tour
Mhm.
around town and whatever. Here's the good restaurants, and here's the great economic development partners, and here's the, you know.
Yeah.
all the stuff. Yes, I love it.
I just have, I guess I'd like to relate that I feel like, despite all the change that we know is coming and is happening as we speak, we have an obligation to move forward and continue our role as a municipal corporation and in all of our aspects as far as our cleanup projects and just fulfilling our mission and representing the Thurston County. So I think that you two, your roles are probably more important than ever. And, you know, no pressure, but I think you need to, and I appreciate you guys being here today. And I think your insight and, you know, how you report back to us is just really going to be very important moving forward. So appreciate you both being here. Any other questions, comments?
No questions, just thank you both. Really great information.
I guess one more question. Sorry, do you have one for him?
Oh, the only thing that I'll mention is, particularly as things get rolling for both legislative and congressional session, everything moves extremely fast. So we may be seeking feedback from you. We may have questions that we need answered. We may, to the extent that we can facilitate getting that as quickly as possible, because it is mind-blowing sometimes how quickly things move, but we will be seeking to be responsive to all of that.
And with us setting, one of my biggest concerns with our cleaning up our legacy impact on tribes and the environment is meeting the obligations that we've said we're gonna meet. We've said we're gonna undertake this $200 million project, and we're still trying to figure out how we're gonna pay for it. City of Olympia, we're all working on the estuary restoration as well. So if you are learning things in this first year of the administration as to, we need to set a different pace of expectations, communicating that back to us of, oh, no, this is gonna be less than we thought, or it's gonna take longer, so that we can set good expectations with the community. Because I think that continues to be chicken and an egg.
The thing that Alex and I have discussed, which concerns me and is something that we will be working on during this legislative session, is driving home the point that the estuary restoration is an extremely important project. It is not the only project. It's not the South Sound's only project. It's not Olympia's only project. It's not Thurston County's only project. And so differentiating and articulating for folks why that's important, and Bud Bay cleanup is important, and, you know, the economic development and the long-term vitality of the port is important, will be another story, couple of stories that we're trying to weave together, because I do worry that the estuary restoration in particular is such a big project that it can overshadow everything else. And so helping folks understand how our projects work together and how our success is kind of tied to one another is something that we've already started working on, but we'll continue to.
I feel like we should check in with Commissioner Vasavita if she has anything, or Missy, is she still there?
She's still here. I've asked her to unmute.
Hi, this is
You
Jasmine, Commissioner Vasavita. Thank you for checking in. I think this was a great briefing, and I really appreciate, Director Smith, that when you put out this RFP, I mean, I think you selected an incredible team, because I know originally we weren't we didn't have this calibrated to really be able to have federal advocacy built in, and then you redid it. And I think we absolutely need this hand in glove state and federal approach. So really, really glad for today's briefing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Bring back the money.
Lots of it. Well, just so you know, I mean, when I worked on Capitol Hill, I worked on the House and Senate side. And I've worked in state government too. And the majority of my career has been with dealing with federal funding and grants. I read the Federal Register every day. I actually read it on the plane today.
Mr. Scoot, so your next.
And I know it's me, actually, so you go, yeah, be wherever you want to be.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
All right. So commissioners, next up is on Peninsula Master Plan, and we're at a point where the consultant team has done a lot of research and looking into the business lines that are associated with the master plan. So the marine terminal, the marina, as well as real estate. And so they've compiled a bunch of information and they're doing their sort of due diligence and digging, but we're at a point where we really would love to have some commission input and direction as well, sort of taking a look at the data they've compiled and narrowing down sort of the direction we want to take the master plan. So Commissioner Vasavada was kind enough to drafted up a couple of thoughts, item numbers 1 and 2 in a slightly different context from this, but I thought they were a great jumping off point for conversation to see if we could get the commission's alignment around a goal for the master plan, and then sort of the purpose behind the master plan so that we can all be communicating consistently about those things. And then also wanted to propose for the commission subcommittee that would work directly with staff and with our consultant team to really provide some input and thoughts, and then be the conduit back to you, the broader commission, on where we're kind of going and where we want to go with the master plan. So maybe we could start with number 1. So this is a proposed goal. Just wondered if the commission wants to align around it or wordsmith it. We're happy to do some wordsmithing. So it says the goal of the Port Peninsula Integrated Master Plan is to expand community access to the peninsula waterfront and catalyze public and private investment with a long-term development plan that is both environmentally and financially sustainable. So thoughts, and I think Missy's in a position to be able to wordsmith. Can you do editing up there if need be?
Okay, I sure can.
Okay, so we can do it in real time. Thoughts, potential changes?
I think it sounds, I thank you, Commissioner Vasavada, for putting so much effort into this. It looks great. The only thing that popped out to me on number 1 was potentially adding economic opportunities, which is in our mission. So one potential location, the goal of the Port Peninsula Integrated Master Plan is to expand community access and economic opportunities to the peninsula waterfront. That seems like it speaks to our mission a little bit more directly. Just an idea.
With the community. Commissioner Vasavada, what did you think of Commissioner Harding's proposal?
I understand the reason for the proposal. I'm concerned because once the goal is pretty much everything in our mission, it doesn't help direct the consultant's work as much. And so the one thing I'd ask Commissioner Harding to consider is how would you then resolve between community access and economic opportunity? For me, I privileged community access, but by saying it has to be financially sustainable, I was proposing building in that, obviously we're not just an endless we don't have deep pockets without building in those private sector partnerships. I do see what you mean though by why, of course, we want economic opportunity. We don't just want, we don't want to forget that part of our mission. So that's all I'd say. I don't know how others can resolve that tension.
I feel like if we remove the text, we end up with our only goal being community access. And for me, that does not illustrate my goal of the master plan. That is an important component. But the way I read it, the only goal is community access. And to me, that's too limiting.
Commissioner Sanders?
The way I read it is also that, but then when it says and catalyze public and private investment, that's kind of economic development, but not worded in that way. So it doesn't seem like it flows together as two goals, or you know what I mean? Like they're two separate, but I feel like it's important to have economic development because it's the second word of our mission. It's the very second word. And so it's just trying to bridge that.
Maybe instead of public and private investment, we could have public and private economic opportunity.
I feel like it kind of like Commissioner Sanders was saying, it's like part one is supported by part two. So the public and private investment is supporting the community access. So if we don't include something about economic opportunities in part one, we're still only supporting community access. We're just making it financially stable, environmentally stable, and using public and private investment. But still, the only thing we're supporting is community access, which I don't think encompasses the intent of the commission. Or it doesn't encompass Vision 2050 or Destination Waterfront in my mind. And I get that we're building upon that, so we'll have more information, but I think just community access. I feel pretty strongly there needs to be something, you could use different words in part one if you wanted. But it can't just be the goal of community access. And to answer your question, Commissioner, I think that it has to work in tandem. I don't think it can be hierarchical, that it's just community access is the priority. That's my opinion.
I would agree, Commissioner Harding. I would also agree with Commissioner Sanders that the second part of the sentence is economic development.
That is, yeah, I interpret it differently, but I am just one person.
Commissioner Isle, do you have any thoughts or?
Interesting discussion. Well, yeah, I think that I think that the goal or the vision of this master plan is it has to incorporate what we're all thinking. We're all thinking this master plan is there to accomplish. My comment is that I would like to see that this goal indicates that the master plan leads to action. It actually leads to completing, what the vision is. We've had circumstances before that have kind of usurped the process of earlier commission's goals, and I would like to make sure that what this master plan does is actually leads to some action that whatever that peninsula looks like at the end.
We included the words, it said, well, blah, 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 catalyze public and private investment with an actionable long-term development plan.
Yeah, something like that, get us started.
So we still have the initial concern about its ambiguity associated with whether it is sort of prioritizing community access without also a parallel priority for economic development.
And shouldn't the goal of the planning be to reflect back what we hear in the planning? So if we go into it with too much of a specific intent, we aren't listening to the community, right? Like, the plan should reflect back what we hear. So Destination Waterfront Vision 2050 reflected back what we hear, and this integrated master plan is going to build upon that to reflect back what we hear, which we will then create an actionable plan on that is environmentally and financially. But I think saying that the goal is just any one thing doesn't allow us to listen.
Well, maybe defining community access would help.
I think
With
the
that.
kayak launch part is what I think that's very important. I
Yeah.
just think that we can't only focus on that.
No, I agree, and that's why I think maybe if we took an effort to define community access, we could incorporate beyond the kayak launch thing, because I agree, we don't wanna be limiting, we wanna encompass, what every aspect of what the peninsula should look like, so.
What if you took out expand community access to the peninsula and you said the goal of the Port Peninsula Integrated Master Plan is to catalyze public and private investment with an actionable long-term development plan that is both environmentally and financially sustainable?
Thoughts, Commissioner Vasavada?
Struck through to expand community access, yes?
Struck through to Peninsula Waterfront and so expand to and.
So it would be goal of the master plan is to catalyze public and private investment with an actionable long-term development plan that is both environmentally, financially sustainable. We put in something that is responsive to community desires or community input.
Sure. Commissioner Vasavada, what do you think about removing that rather than augmenting it?
If you're speaking, you're muted.
I'm sure to unmute.
Okay, sorry, the host was not allowing me to unmute for a little while here, so maybe you can change that setting. This is Jasmine. I think that I'd like to get at something, the real core question as we direct consultants to work on this is, are we doing development for development's sake? Which I think a lot of the constituents I engage with are really concerned about that, or do we have broader objectives that are the reason we want to start to invest in developing the Olympic Peninsula? So, and I bring that up because I think the changes you're moving towards, which is like our goal is just to catalyze investment, sort of starts to lose like the why. And I think the real thing, the role of our commission is to help explain why we want to do this work, because then consultants can help come up with the strategies to achieve it. So I don't like the direction this is now starting to go, though I am comfortable with the earlier idea of mentioning, you know, of inserting economic opportunity.
Can I ask, so what, I guess, what is our goal for this, this exercise? Because we've already got our consultants under contract. There's a scope of work that they have. So are we creating this in alignment with that, with what they're doing? I guess I'm confused as to what the actual purpose of this is. Don't get me wrong, I think having a committee of the commission to participate in this is a great idea. I'm just not 100% clear on what the rest of this is for.
I think that it's so that there's clarity from the commission body as to the intent of the commission. So let's just hypothetically say it's Commissioner Basavada and Commissioner Basavada says, no, the priority is community access. And I say, no, it's economic development. Not saying we would do that, Commissioner Basavada, we would work together. But we want to be clear on carrying forth the intent of the commission body. Because there is a certain amount of discretion that's gonna be in place if we're acting nimbly as a subcommittee. And neither Commissioner Basavada nor I think are comfortable doing that without an understanding of where the commission body wants us to go, at least to some extent. So, and I think this conversation evidences that. So Commissioner Basavada is saying that she would like to see this in there because of the constituents she's hearing from. I feel the exact opposite. I feel like when you look at the constituent feedback in Vision 2050 and Destination Waterfront, which are broad public processes, you see a diversity of what people want to see. Some want a hotel, some want a kayak lunch, some want a restaurant, some want a trail, and that's the exercise of this, is balancing all of those.
Okay, well, I just, and I appreciate that, thank you. I think that that's a heavy lift to ask for us to do in a 20-minute session in our our commission session, our work session. And I certainly, I think Commissioner Sanders and Commissioner Tong certainly probably have ideas also. I would like to recommend that we just take this back and we can each use this as a guideline and make our suggestions. And I'll 100% transparency here. I did not have a chance to look at this before I came in today, so I would appreciate a little more time.
Sure, absolutely. Why don't we tee it up for our December work session and we
Sure.
can continue the conversation.
There is no December work session unless you want to schedule one.
Oh, Fui,
Missy, work with us.
apparently Alex wants to schedule one. So.
And I think Commissioner Basavada and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this really is a philosophical guidance from the commission as to whether we want to influence the outcome of this or whether we want to be open. So if we say we don't want anything that's blue because we don't like blue, we can say that, right? But is that where we're going? Are we trying to narrow the funnel? Or, and I think that's the question mark for the commission. So if you would all think about that, that's what I feel unclear on from the group.
And part of what instigated this for me is our consultant team did a lot of analyses and I think kind of came up with their own ideas about where they wanna sort of direct things. But I felt that I personally am not comfortable with sort of directing or making decisions, sort of big philosophical decisions about the future of our industrial lands on the Port Peninsula and things like that, without having you guys fully engaged and really knowing the direction you all want to go. So getting your input will be super helpful.
And multifamily housing is a great example.
Mhm.
There's very divided opinions on whether that's a good idea or not. We as a commission need to answer that question as part of this process. I think, because if we're doing it, we're doing it. And if we're not doing it, we're not doing it. And it will drastically change how we respond to the feedback we get from the community in this planning process. Cause we might just say, nope, not doing it. Or we might say, yep, we want to build it everywhere. or something in between, because I go to counseling, so things aren't so black and white.
Well, and I think, you know, at some point this will get down in the master planning process to different alternatives that will then go out to the public. And but I think we need a lot of the commission's input in deciding what those alternatives are.
So if you guys can think about that.
That'd be great. Okay.
Multifamily being a good example, some of the other things that have been considered being an example.
Yeah, so sort of like even big picture, 30,000 foot level, we want 66 acres of industrially zoned property on the peninsula. I mean, is that part of the future that this commission wants to see? And that's
You guys are okay with that?
Chewing on it.
okay, so we'll chew on it until December.
Great.
All right, thank you. Next, 15 minutes for budget. No, just teasing. As much time as you would like for the budget.
So,
Well, not really.
well, and I'll be succinct as I can be, but I did, without having any specific directions, I did just create a couple documents I'll hand out, and I did hand one to Commissioner Vasavit, which left, so you got a chance
Good.
to see the same information as well. I'll go through this quickly. And if you did not get these in advance, as, well, I mean, these are just kind of talking points. And I know that this entire process has been a lot. And we've been trying to make a lot of changes. And then when those changes have come about, depending on timing and how they've looked, they may have created some confusion. So specifically what I handed here, what you'll see is a few of the slides that are in the text. You'll recognize them from the budget presentation. What we don't have out in front of you is yet a fourth edition of the full budget that just got done an hour before we came down here, something like that. But I'm gonna tell you why and what the differences are, and then try and go through what you've seen, what the changes are, at least at a 10,000 foot level. And, you know, if anyone's listening or wants to review this, can also maybe connect the dots as well. So I don't know if that is where we are, but I think that's kind of where we are. So I'm gonna run with that and tell me if I'm wrong and
So
or,
the third review that's currently on the website is not the most recent draft.
this just got done today, correct? This is not on there, but this is not on there because it does not have these numbers in it because I'm still working with the assessor's office to get the final tax numbers in. So I don't have them. And to redo this is a very manual process, meaning it's not plug a number in and it kind of cascades through and changes everything. It's plug a number in, plug a number in, plug a number in, and go through the whole thing. So in the hope of not killing Tricia, I have taken that upon myself to not do that yet. I mean, there obviously the final budget is final. I got to get it to you to see it before you vote on it, so you see it as well and get it out so it's online as well.
Final budget is final.
Yes, the final budget is final, absolutely.
Tricia, how are you holding?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. It is, like Tad said, it's a very manual process and we will work to change that in the future. To try to streamline it and make it so we can react faster to different things. We've just inherited what is here and so we're working through it.
And I guess that was my question, like, do you need investment in something so that this is a more current, modern process? That's for both of you, I guess, like.
We are upgrading to the most the latest and greatest from Microsoft. It's called Business Central. That's in the 2024 budget. So that is, we're starting that process now and that system hopefully will give us more tools to work with and not be so reliant on Excel and Word and PDF documents. So we're hoping that will do that.
One of the things that held that up was the two proposed systems that were out there. One would not allow us to see a good picture of historical data. And we absolutely need to be able to look back to make sure that we are tracking with the history, going through audits, being able to access that information with the port. And then on the newer piece going forward, being able to look at better reporting to the management level, the director level. Right now, licensing fees to get that kind of visibility out to the directors is prohibitively expensive. But under the new version, it would be in the hundreds instead of into the, many, many thousands of dollars. So we can push down that visibility and those tools to more of the people that are in the different operating units so they can see a better real-time picture of what's going on. That's the idea. If I can run through this real quickly, and I'm not gonna go through it in super detail. Pages 3 and 4, that you're gonna see something called the tax limitations worksheet. Don't try and make any heads or tails. I'm just letting you see that as a document, and that is a worksheet that works out with the assessor's office our tax levy numbers. So that's a lot of information on there, and you'll just see a few boxes that I highlighted in yellow. Those are the things that have been moving targets. One of them is the beginning balance in agreement where we ended last year between the port and the assessor's office. It's minorly different. We're going with the assessor's office to be sure everything is in agreement across the board. There was a utility fee number that didn't get updated until a few days ago into last week. And also I remember, you may remember me saying that there was 64,500,000,000 and change in assessed value. That actually went down by almost $500 million for Thurston County. So there have been some huge changes in that assessed value as they've been going through that process. So where we started out a few iterations ago on the budget, where we landed, and I said that the proposed tax levy total is going to be roughly $8 million, and then we went lower. Guess what? We're back slightly over $8 million again. The number that I got received, and I have to absolutely confirm this, for the refund amount, I was assured last year's number of roughly 79,000 was uncharacteristically high, and that it wouldn't be that high this year. The number that I just got back is 113,000, which is way higher than that. So I'm just trying to make sure that we didn't get a bad copy of this, and that I'm confirming it before we, submit anything from our side. That's absolutely right. Assuming that is, we're back up to a proposed tax levy total number, and with the levy refund now at $8.08 million basically, which is just about where we started when we did the first budget iteration. So we're back up to the annual increase of $1.34 and the associated millage rate change. So of all things, we ended up kind of coming circularly back to where we were. So that's all this is really telling you, and to give you just some information where we landed. So that's the cash statutory budget on the second to last page, updated. This is what you actually end up voting on when we vote. This is very, very, very simplified, condensed budget version that then gets, so it's one of the very first sheets of the budget book, and what gets reported to the state and all that good stuff. Is a very similar point to where we start out with just under 28 million, and we end up with 19.7 million at the end of the day. Everything that's in the budget. And I'm being recorded again.
I just joined the meeting on accident. I apologize. I was trying to get-
And that is basically that packet of information, just to let you know what it is that you're looking at, if it's of help, because I didn't know exactly what to prepare for this discussion, so.
And when we ended the commission meeting last on November 12th, we were still waiting on the tax levy, and then Executive Director Smith asked that we add one more FTE. And that was added to the administration department, and it's executive admin / public records officer. So that was added. So with benefits and salary, that's about $105,000 increase. So between the 12th and when you see the final, that is the only dollar amount that increases expenses. And then this piece, it affects our non-operating revenues, the tax levy dollars.
at the 30,000 foot level, we recognize that this 2025 will be a spending year for us. There was a lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of some capital investments, including the temporary warehouse that we are hoping to make so we can generate some revenue. So we've got 2 revenue generating projects. First time we've done that in a little while. And then just getting at some of the deferred maintenance. But we do hope that this is just laying the foundation for more revenues in the future so that our, we'll continue to build up our cash and reserves.
I did jot down a quick laundry list of all the changes that we have done over the process. We most recently added that FTE. We added $750,000 to the CPI for the parking lot refurbish over here. $250,000 of that is customer supplied, I believe. So that's a $500,000 increase in that cost to the board. You've seen Tricia and I go through a couple iterations of G&A allocation, which doesn't change the total dollar amount, has moved it around in an attempt to better and more equitably distribute that. We did have one error in accounting for depreciation that we talked about against the terminal in the last presentation that we had to correct. It was a keying error on our side. And we also had a couple other smaller changes that were between the second and third iteration of the budget. I think there were a couple changes that had to do with the airport and at least one. And those, I think, because of the view of the third iteration when we stopped, because we were going to have more changes. And then we got to the fourth and we added more changes. It looked very different than where we started out. So I think that explains some of the variances that you were seeing.
And we did add the $250,000 to the marine terminal revenue to account for if the portable warehouse was built. Also added an associated depreciation for that. Added 100,000 to the boatyard for that for the revenue that we may realize next year for that. And then there was a little bit, about $50,000 expense in the marine terminal that was added, that it would be associated with the increase in revenue for the warehouse work.
Good time's a charm.
So you're gonna post that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Well, the only thing that I'm waiting on is the assessor to call me back and to confirm that those final 2 numbers, that there is one number that I need to confirm from them, and I have calls and emails into them for the last couple of days. I know they are swamped as well, and they were also running at least 2, if not 3 weeks behind on their end as well. So
So obviously we can't vote on a budget until it's finalized. We're supposed to be voting in on it next
Monday.
week. So
We'll get the final one to you as soon as Ted gets those numbers.
I will hope to try and have it tomorrow. Wednesday is the cutoff date to have the information for you in time to be able to vote for that meeting, and everything is predicated on that. So that is what I'm aiming to do.
okay.
Yeah, but we'll get it out sooner if we can.
So the worksheet that's just an example. That's not really,
It is,
it doesn't seem to match this.
It does not match at this time. That is an old number. We didn't update it into the packet, because if it changes, that changes like multiple areas
Yeah,
in
So
the,
this could still be different anyway.
right.
If theoretically, if he confirms something different, that could change. That's why we held off on updating the very final budget draft. So that doesn't have this in there and it's not exactly the same. I mean, to be clear, unless there's something drastic, we are talking in the tens of thousands of dollars at this point. So it is a fine point. It does need to be correct.
Yeah.
But I can't confirm it until I know that I can say that it's absolutely right. And I am working to get that confirmation.
This is provided to you by the appraiser's office?
The different.
No. We
pieces are-
fill it in. We
This is-
get information, various pieces come to us. There are other supporting documents that allow me to fill out certain fields on here that we have been getting intermittently and or newer versions of as the weeks have gone through. And one of the things that I didn't, because this is such a manual process to update the budget book, is that every time that I got a change in the assessed value, or they were telling me, you know, the utility rate's gonna change, it's gonna change, and then it did. I'm looking at 3 to 4 different changes on this worksheet that would have had 4 more draft versions of this, and I'm just trying to not kill everyone here.
So.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, please, go ahead.
given that, you know, it does take time to dial in these numbers and make sure they're accurate. Tad, I recognize that, and you're still working on it. You said some of the inputs are a little delayed. Can we have an agreement that if you don't have numbers you're very confident on, should we decide to put the budget action on the December 9th meeting instead of November 25th?
I don't think you can do that because I think that the notifications have gone out and the RCW has certain timeframes in place that I'm really going to aim to have this done and for your review, so you have an allotted amount of time to be able to look at it.
Well, I think to Commissioner Vasavita's point too, is that we not only have to have that final, but everybody has to be comfortable to vote in favor of approving it. So what is there any leeway as far as how we get this approved? Any, I guess.
Commission would have to adopt an amended schedule.
Yeah.
That had the final date of
All right.
adoption.
And it may not be
Direct-
that, I mean, if you don't get the information you need, like you're counting on,
Mhm.
that, you know, that's through no fault of yours or ours, so.
My preference would be to amend the schedule right now and make it December 9th, rather than have this continue to happen.
Do we have to do another hearing? If we amend the schedule?
All right.
I would have to read the RCWs again, but the RCW states that we have to have it to the county by the end of November, have the tax levy certification passed through the commission.
I see. Okay.
But how can we have that to them if we don't have
Yeah.
a number?
I don't know. And then,
I mean, I get that we're talking about the auditor and the assessor, but like, it's November 18th and we don't have numbers?
And
it's new to me. It's new,
Considering-
it's a slate as well. I'm not sure.
if the requirement is associated with the tax levy, is that something, I think there's 2 different resolutions and 2 different adoptions. So if the
Yeah.
commission wanted to keep November 25th for adopting the tax levy and the resolution around the tax levy, then but wanted more time to review the rest of the budget, could we do that, or is that not okay?
Well,
I think
that's-
it relates to both the
Yeah.
budget and the tax levy, but they're, just because, so the budget can have amendments throughout the year, and the budget is the budget. It's not a license for us to spend. We still have to bring everything through the commission. Executive Director Smith has put out that, you know, we are looking at, constantly reviewing our spending to keep it down for the, you know, because we're here to serve the community. So, the budget, they have the schedules and the laws for a purpose, because they all roll into each other for, on up to the state level for the tax levies. So, I would have to do a little research to try to figure out if we're allowed to go past those deadlines. But we definitely have the options to amend the budget in the future as many times as you wish.
One would like to speak as well.
Commissioners, this is Warren Hendrickson. Good afternoon. If I can help, if the jurisdiction misses the November 30th deadline, we may not increase the tax levy above last year's level, and that's RCW 84.52.070.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll hope we'll get this information tomorrow and everything aligns with what we've got here.
It's the last piece that we have to put in.
All right, any other questions or comments?
I guess, I mean, and Commissioner Vasavada has pointed this out, but it's not ideal for the public that we're at this late in the game either. So just recognizing that the public that we are working on this process. Because
And-
the intent is to be very transparent and methodical with how we present information, especially the budget. So just saying that out loud.
Yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner. And we've been talking about that a lot and recognizing that historically, the board has not done a good job about being transparent with the budget. We recognize that and are trying to improve that, but we've got a team that is new and has been short-staffed in our finance team and has been working off of templates from those finance folks who maybe weren't as transparent as we all wish they had been. So we are already talking about starting our budget process far earlier next year, and we're gonna do the retreat with you all where we talk about some of the budget policies and things that you all have said you would like to have some good conversations about. So we're doing the best we can for this year and really hoping for improvement next year.
If there's a new system that'll help, that would be great. Yeah.
It should, it really should.
Great. All right, anything else, or we ready to move on?
Ready to move on, I think.
Okay.
I would love to maybe add something to the executive session on November 25th. As you might have seen in the newspaper, there's an article this weekend about Dancing Goats moving and dispensing of its building. And so we'd love to have an executive to talk to you about that.
It's okay with me.
That's this one top one
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
As far as scheduling goes, all those joint meetings might be something good to put some elbow grease into for 2025 and just programming them out. Recognizing that they're difficult to schedule. So as people are forming their calendars.
Okay, we will look at that.
For the agenda setting, is that, we're looking at the agenda now?
Yep.
Yes.
I believe we need to consider, select a new chair for next year, and that will happen on the January 13th meeting, is that correct? Or does it happen at a different time?
And then I was curious about committee assignments as well, Jasmine. Commissioner.
Yeah.
Conjunction with that.
Yeah, I do think we've typically done that the first meeting of the year, so.
And I believe it's in our bylaws that we have to approve the calendar and the committees.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And since it would be a good time, we've mentioned a few changes we want to make in our resolution.
Yes.
So it would be great if we could consider some of them in the December 9th meeting so that we're ready for January 13th.
Okay. And Richard, do you have a thought on the best way to tee that up, circulate the resolution to everyone and have folks identify changes in advance, and then we could compile those at the staff level and have them ready on December 9th? Would that be?
If that's doable, Director Smith, I'd most like your recommendation to the committee for changes to the resolution that help kind of
Okay.
our work go more smoothly. One thing we've considered is sort of making it more rational how right now we have take public input up front in the meeting, then we take it on each issue. It's like we're taking each issue 3 times. We might want to figure out how we're touching that. There were some issues about the POCAC bylaws being or our resolution on the POCAC being a little too restrictive and giving them some more flexibility. And then it may be, I think you've done such a good job setting us on a better trajectory. I don't know if there are places where maybe you would appreciate a little more flexibility and where we could at least discuss whether the commission is comfortable with those places.
Okay, we can do that. Get that conversation with our directors as well.
One of the things, oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
No, please, Amy, go ahead.
One of the things that we had talked about with the previous executive director was having quarterly reviews of the executive director. Given that you'll be working on the calendar, I think having that regular feedback is something that really helps the team function better. So programming that in would be great. It gives us an opportunity to course correct if necessary, or give you a big pat on the back, or both.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Any other changes, additions, thoughts as we plan for 2025?
Alex, I'd like to know when you're going to be able to give us an update on the recruitment for the new economic development director.
Well, I can give you an update now. We've got 5 applicants that we're interviewing for with the first interview, a screening interview. We had 2 of them today. We have 2 tomorrow, and we have 1 early next week. And then the thought was to pick a finalist or 2 if we've got 2 great candidates, and then bring them to the director team for a second interview. So our goal is to finish this up in the next I don't know, be ready to make an offer to someone by early December.
Terrific. And then I'll just say on the November 25th and 9th meeting calendar, I see we're going to get a briefing on another option to lease amendment with Panattoni. I am not eager to pass an amendment without understanding more about where the conversations have been. And so just hoping there's going to be really good visibility here. Otherwise, I want you to know where I stand.
And would that be a conversation in executive session about conversations we've had with Panattoni, or are you thinking about having
I don't know that there's any executive session exception that would apply here. I think that we've been asked to kick down a date in the lease repeatedly, and the last discussion was that and my understanding is they're not paying anything right now on their option. So if you have a reason you can have a conversation in executive session, that's great. But otherwise, like I would rather this be after we have an economic development director who can help us understand more. But
okay. I appreciate that. We'll talk about that at the director team level, Commissioner. Appreciate the input.
Is there anything that would be helpful to you with the team as far as programming?
I don't think so. I think I'm excited to get us staffed up with filling these new positions, and then really having a full team to support you as we re-engage with other jurisdictions. And so I think that's what I can see right now, but thank you for asking.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I would just add one more thing. We've been kind of maybe in the holding pattern. We'd like to have a better conversation about the marina now that we have a new marina director. We talked about a town hall possibly, so I think we should not lose track of that.
Actually, that would be super helpful, commissioners. We've got a number of topics for town halls, and so definitely one with our marina director. But also we definitely heard folks want to do a town hall for Bud Inlet. If there are other topics that folks think would be good for town halls, we're happy to try to schedule those.
And does the commission think those should be individual or open topics or just at staff discretion or?
And to what extent do commissioners want to participate? I'm offered to do another town hall with just me, and I'm happy to do that, but if commissioners who'd like to do town halls as individual commissioners or as groups, are happy to facilitate that. You don't have to tell me now. It's just something to think about.
That's a lot of pressure right there to answer that.
I feel like scheduling is challenging and allowing more freedom with topics is better than not getting stuff scheduled. So
Okay.
if people have something they want to talk about and that's a forum that people appreciate, my personal opinion would be to open it up. Even if you have a focus, but just giving people the opportunity to share in a different forum.
Could even have them scheduled regularly.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea.
Topic of the month.
I'm planning on doing 2 a year, like 1 in March, and maybe we as an organization do them,
One a month.
or that might be too much, but you know, 1 a quarter, twice a year even, I don't know. Just add that to your list.
Okay. Switching.
I know you're just running out of tasks.
That's right. I'm just twiddling my thumbs, so.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, this meeting